Vikram, we are live.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We'll just wait for a couple of minutes and allow others to also join us. A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you all to this webinar on CXO Vigilance, Insider Scams and Ethical Violations. Today's deliberations will be focusing on the CXO and CFO's experience and expectations regarding the ethical violations and the scams abetted by insiders, and what are the evolving trends in preemptive analysis, investigations, and setting up a vigilance mechanism. The speakers will also delve into the increasing risk of fraud and ethical compliance violations that is present right from onboarding and operation involvement to the exit of the employees and third parties. These violations range from data theft, sexual harassment, personal gratifications, insider trading, dealings with government agencies, and organization relationship with regulatory bodies. Before moving ahead, I would like to give a brief about ASA and our speakers today. ASA is a 3-decade-old consulting firm with a team of over 1,000+ professionals spread across 8 offices in India. A major part of our focus is on foreign companies setting up and operating in India. Today, we are one of India's foremost accounting and consulting firms, assisting our clients in setting up their business, M&A, partner search, risk advisory, taxation, and compliance issues, including accounting, payroll, IFRS, etc. Now, I would like to introduce our esteemed panel. Nagesh Pinge will be our moderator for the day. Nagesh is a chartered accountant and law graduate with over 39 years of experience with many reputed firms. He is an expert in ethics, corporate governance, risk management, and internal audit. He is an independent director on multiple boards such as Goa Carbon, Arvind Fashions, MCX Clearing Corporation, Aditya, Birla, Sun Life Insurance, and the like. He has authored a technical guidance note on risk-based audit for banks published by the ICI. The next speaker is Satish Shenoy. He is a chartered accountant, a cost accountant, and a company secretary. He is a senior professional with over 40 years of experience in internal audit, risk management, forensics, and ethics functions. He has held senior positions in PSUs like Hindustan Petroleum and private enterprises including Lupin, Reliance Retail, L&T, Onida, and Aditya Birla Group. He has also worked with the Government of India, the Ministry of Petroleum, on deputation with the Oil Coordination Committee. Prameesh Barlota, our next speaker, is currently on the board and also CFO of Samsonite India. He is a chartered accountant and MBA finance with over 24 years of experience in various industries ranging from oil and gas global IT companies and brand companies that are leaders in their categories. He is an avid reader and is involved in various CSR activities. Our next panelist, Sandhya Sharma, is currently the head of operations of Schindler India, and she has taken up this challenging role after a successful stint as CFO in this company. She is an experienced chartered accountant, having extensively worked with the Mahindra Group and has been with Schindler India for over 12 years now. She believes if I can, you can, and she aspires to inspire and continuously work on improving herself. Our last panelist, Akhilesh Thakur, is the national head of our risk advisory service practice in ASA. Akhilesh has over 20 years of experience in forensic review, internal audit, and business consulting projects. Prior to joining ASA, Akhilesh has been associated with the Big Four and niche account consulting firms. He has worked across different industries and provided services to clients spread across the globe. He is on the board of governance of the Institute of Internal Auditors, India, and was the past president of IIA Bombay chapter also. Before we begin, a couple of instructions for the webinar. Please note that all the participants will be in listen to only mode throughout the webinar. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the questions section in the chat box. The presentation will be followed by a Q&A, and a link to the recording of this webinar will be emailed to you. Thank you, and over to you, Nagesh.
Thank you, Vikramji, for rightly introducing all of us. And I think I'm really, fortunate to get great members in my panel. And the subject is also quite exciting. And I must say that, frauds and ethical violations is something I sit on as many as 9 boards. And I think in all board meetings and in all audit committee meetings, that becomes a hot discussion to talk about. And I think, as I've seen, and I'm in touch, coming from an internal audit profession, I'm regularly in touch with most of the people there on that particular part. And what comes out very clearly is everybody knows that frauds do happen. Everybody knows that some sort of it could be data fraud, it could be really in terms of cash, it could be anything else, which could be very structured and very intelligent kind of fraud that could happen, but they are all happening. But apparently everybody in a hush-hush voice says that nothing comes out very openly, and it's more a secret kind of mission that happens. Number of times people say, yeah, it is confidential, we will talk about it and on that account. So I think in that context, I must say what kind of vigilance is done in today's, I would say, companies, and what kind of expectations from the audit committee and also the board and also from the CFOs. We have with us right people on that account. So let me start, in fact, putting this particular question to all of them before I would say I'll begin with. I just want to take you through one typical kind of report which I love to see every alternate year. This has come in the year 2022, and that report it is issued by an organization called ACFE, which is nothing but what we call Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, which is the US-based firm which comes out every alternate year with a report called Report to the Nations, as they call it. And it's a very wide kind of network they have. They talk and they send this kind of things to many people who are connected with the corporate world on that account, and based on that their findings come out. This year ACFE has really come out with a brilliant kind of findings, and that's something which is if you realize it, I think post-COVID time, though we call it business as usual, I think I would say people will also say fraud as usual kind of things on that account. So by virtue of that, some typical characteristics of that report to the nation says, they are saying whether you know it or not, if you know it, good. If you don't know, tough luck, guys. 5% of our revenues, and we are talking about top line, we are not talking about the net profit, you are losing to the fraud. And if you get to know that this is happening, good for you. If you don't know, jolly well, guys, look at your site and see how you can look at it. That's one. Number two, 42% of the tips through which you get to know about frauds. That means, you require right kind of channel to make it open to the organization to see how really you can pick up those voices, pick up those typical red flags, typical, I would say, some sort of an information that comes your way so that you know something is going wrong somewhere. And that's something which is very critical on that account. And out of those, this what we call the tips, almost 70 to 80% comes out of your own internal employees who give you that information. That means that organization knows what's happening on that particular part. And I think this is where, as a CXO vigilance, we need to see to it that, it says that you jolly well know what's happening in your own अपने अंदर में क्या होता है. That is the way we should look at it on that account rather than looking externally on that account. And in that, they are saying email, web-based kind of communication, as well as the hotlines are very, very critical from that perspective. People alternatively use at lower strata of people are very comfortable giving you telephone hotlines kind of thing because they don't want to talk to you. At the same time, they will go to the external there from where they will send a message so that you don't get tracked on that account. So like that is happening. Additionally, it takes 12 months to detect frauds. And this is where I always said that, we are not past 12 months after, the COVID is over. So I think a lot of things may be in the offing to find out what's really happening on that particular part. And red flags, according to that particular survey, 85% of the people who are doing it, you will find they have already shown some red flags. Either the person working very late, he is working alone, he is not going on any kind of leave, all those kinds of things are happening on that particular part. So in that context, I must say that we must in fact find out from the panel, and we have got a great kind of panel here. We have 2 CFOs, and of course now Sandhya has also taken on as chief of operations, so she also has a wide experience. And I have one more guy called Satish, Shenoy, who was my colleague, a good friend, and he's the one who has in fact come out with a brilliant kind of, he was associated with on forensic accounting standards, which ICAI, the Institute of Chartered Accountants, has come out with. So I think with considering these 3 people are there, and I always say when internal knowledge nahi hota hai, so then there is always an external knowledge you rely on, and we have thus Akhilesh, Thakur there on that particular part. So I request all of these people to speak about their own experiences on that account. And let me go first to Prameesh. Prameesh is the first one because he likes to travel a lot, and you can see the Samsonite bag behind this particular thing on that account. Apparently, I'm told he keeps one bag ready all the time on that account. So Prameesh, can I suggest that you can kick off this particular thing? What exactly CXO vigilance, what do you expect that to be on that particular part? And how your organization, or even not necessarily you have to talk about Samsonite as such, but consumer fast moving consumer goods and your kinds of things, what kind of thing they are looking out for. It will be nice. I will say you can cover it in 3 or 4 or 5 minutes. It will be great on that account. So over to you, Prameesh.
Yeah, thanks, Nagesh. I work in a travel company, so I love to travel. Even though I'm a CFO, but I keep on traveling for 20 days.
Yes.
So yeah, the expectation part is about 2 parts, I suppose. One is about expectation of prevention and expectation about the course correction. So in prevention, it's a well settled methodology now. Thanks to all the corporate governance issue which is being highlighted, and even in US and Europe, which has mandated many laws which have a large implication on organization, both financially and reputation wise. So the awareness has grown very much right now. And so one of the expectation would be in terms of prevention, that how organization is able to prevent. So the expectation is from CFO, from the management, how they are communicating the importance of the corporate governance to the team. What kind of training material they are using. It's very important to also attach a lot of importance to the kind of material which you are using. So many times, and we have seen in the company, they make an in-house, they attempt to first make it in-house, but the kind of training material is required because it's not a black and white always when you try to execute the corporate governance part. It's not, some of the events are, definitely it's wrong, definitely right. Somewhere it may be a little confusing. And such a kind of good corporate governance material, if you can acquire from an outside help, it'll be very, very useful. So one of that thing also companies must take notice of, that making in-house versus getting this information outside is something which they have to look at. They also have to look at the best practices part, which also they understand over a period of time. One of the things with like rotation, which you talked about, is very, very important. So, I mean, sometimes it's standard thing to talk about. You have to rotate, but companies in their zeal to take best out of the best employee who are there and get the experience, sometimes miss it. So rotation is important. Compulsory leaves are important. Other area of expectation is also about the due diligence part. So when you have an association with an employee or new vendors or new customers, for example, does your process includes information about due diligence, about disclosure requirement, whether, for example, in vendor is directly or indirectly associated with any of your employee, for example. So those processes should be also part of the, I mean, should be looked in terms of corporate governance and should be imbibe those control factors in this process. So I think prevention is one area where there's a definite expectation, quite settled one from the organization. And another area where it is not a stated expectation, but definitely organization should take care is about the course correction part. As you rightly mentioned, no company or no board would expect that in the history of an organization it will be a clean slate. There will be always some movement which will happen. I mean, that is something we'll have to accept. But how do management address it? For example, the element of surprise is the board or the CFO, if he comes to know about an event, is taking immediate action in terms of eliminating the surprise element to the board, for example. I mean, we would like to have more information why this unfortunate event has happened, who has done it, what is the control weakness. But if the board hears from outside, it will be even more damaging. So even though information could be partial, it's important for CFO to share that information to the management, to the CEO, make people aware, make people board aware, and then follow up with more information, obviously. So the negation of the surprise element is very, very critical when this kind of event happens. Then about what kind of gravity of the nature, if the event is anywhere connected with the management or any of other senior employee, how fast and how quickly the whole team acts, how the board acts, that is very, very critical. I mean, we can't have a situation where just because an employee is a very critical position, then we wait for some more time, or we kind of delay or kind of accept some compromise. No people, no, like just no person can be bigger than a country. No one individual employee, howsoever critical is, can be bigger than the company itself. So the how fast a management is acting, that is something also very, very important. And thirdly, and the last thing is which management, the CFO should be aware that about the reputation risk and the liability risk. So if an event happens, what happens to the company's reputation? We are living in the world of high information, super fast, really it's super fast, and information can be misunderstood also in the social network area. So how quickly you address it, and you should be aware that the information may leak out, and that happens. How are you addressing? We have seen some cases, past cases in our country also. Many of the some of the reputed companies, I know the reputations that this kind of information is gone out, then there's a press and there's everybody's involved. So the reputation path and liability path, that is something management has to focus. There cannot be a set guideline, but it has to be on top of the agenda when such kind of event happens. So this would
wonderfully explained. Can I move to Satish? And Satish will be wearing a dual hat here. Satish was part of forensic audit, but I think I will say forget that for the time being. You are also a very effective internal auditor, and you have played very, very, I would say, great innings in the retail business, and then even in manufacturing kind of thing, where you work with one of the biggest group in India. I think I would like to hear from you how I would say this CXO vigilance is done as per your experience on that account. Now, of course, all that experience has gone into help ICA in coming out with forensic audit. I think that forensic audit, I want you to keep it separately, because I will take up that matter after I've talked with all of them. So don't discuss too much about forensic at this point. I would like to hear your hardcore experience, so that will come in handy. So over to you, Satish.
First class. Thank you. I think Prameesh is a perfect example of living in a suitcase, So it kind of he just said whatever. And so thanks Nagesh, thanks everybody for being here. Thanks to ASA for giving this opportunity to be part of this panel. Yeah, Nagesh, I'll just restrict myself on the roles which I played as heads of audit of various big groups. One of the groups where I had worked, where we always felt that nothing can happen to us, that typical thing that we have such strong processes, we are so, our history is so good. And there was a vigil mechanism. The company is always ahead of the curve, has implemented many things even before it became mandate. But on the vigilance, on the whistleblowing mechanism, while there was a structure, there was a method to record complaints, the somehow or the other, or for whatever reasons, the seriousness was not really there. Until a day came when there was a very big complaint about a very, very important person in the company, not only him, but people down the line. And that thing came up to me and they said that you need to investigate this. And I knew that it is going to call for, and this happened many years ago, it would call for using different techniques and all of that, which we did not technically have within our team of internal auditing, and that's why we went external at that point in time. And I think the benefit, because I saw the benefit and I continue to see the benefit, I was there in that company last week as well. I continue to see the benefits that have come, because thereafter this this complaint was investigated. It is in public domain, so I have no issue in talking about it. But it was investigated, malafides were found, and action was taken against the employees. As Prameesh said, nobody is bigger than the company, and action was indeed taken against them. We set up a beautiful mechanism for registering complaints. And let me tell you this, once people in the company saw that there is some seriousness, there is a great seriousness being attached to this whistleblowing mechanism, automatically this drove many more complaints to come. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. But Nagesh himself said in that report, it was mentioned that 5 or more percentage of your turnover actually gets crossed by frauds. And if you know it, good. If you don't know, do something to know. And I think this was on the second part, that we didn't know, and we are doing something now in a very clear way, just as the company did every other thing absolutely well, very seriously. This particular aspect was taken up very seriously, and I could see tremendous benefits that have come out of it, because the overall governance improved, the reporting to the audit committee, to the board also improved, and we really got a lot of laurels for that. And the good part is that even after so many years, the intensity with which it is done, the seriousness with which it is done, the all pervading kind of a thing, because there was a central repository, there was a quarterly review, there was a monthly review among the small team, the CFO, the company secretary, the head of HR, and myself. There was a monthly meeting which I used to lead, and things like that. But it really helped, and it's always good to have a good mechanism of whistleblowing, which has helped this group tremendously. That's what I thought, Nagesh. I should add.
Thank you, Satish. Thank you. I think very well explained by a live example. I really appreciate that particular part. I will now turn towards Sandhya, if you don't mind, Sandhya. And I think Sandhya has a little time constraint. She has to move out at 5 p.m. sharp. So whenever you want to move after you have talked about it, we will let you go. So no problems on that account, Sandhya. Sandhya, I think you come from Schindler, and Schindler, as we know, is three. I call it elevators, escalators, and I think moving walks. These are the ones that you get involved with that as a product on that account. So I want to know, as a CXO Vigilance, how do one take that elevator form for the I would say ethics and the the fraud related part on that account? How I would say escalate mechanism that you have on that particular part will come in handy. So if you can talk about that thing also. And moving walks is like taking it across the organization through your moving walks. how you carry on this ethics to the organization. If you can talk about it on that particular part with some live examples, that will be very great, because I would say Schindler has a great reputation, and I think in my apartment I always travel by that, and I'm very comfortable and finding whenever you people come and attend to it. So over to you, Sandhya, for talking about how the CXO vigilance from your side.
Yeah, so thank you for the opportunity. I think so Vijay was the one he was our audit partner as well, signing partner, so that's how I got connected to this forum. My pleasure, and thanks for the question, Nagesh, because project business, and it is true for all the companies which are into projects, it starts not at the sales front, at the end front. For me, or for all project based companies, the vigilance starts at the initial code submission front. Okay, like you ask me a gold finish elevator, and I promise you that, but I don't configure it in the system because maybe you don't accept the cost or something like that. I can mess it up. And later on, the salesperson can probably be out of the system or will be out of the system, and the company will get into a kind of discussion with the customer that why this difference is. And probably when we come to know the difference, it will be too late, because it will be the installation already in your building. So it starts by how do I ensure that the configuration is same as you have placed the order with. So it starts right from that point. Every small thing, to give an example, who will give the scaffolding? Okay, I can say to reduce the cost that scaffolding will be given by the customer, and the customer doesn't even know of it. It will be a tussle at the installation stage. So we have to ensure that at the configuration stage, all these points are well understood by the system as well as by the customer, so that we are on the same page. It starts with not taking any cutout on the agreement, or any, like I give you an AMC contract, I tell you 20,000 and at the back end I cut out and put something else. Doesn't work. So all these things have to be kind of imbibed at every stage of the, or every department of the organization. It cannot be left at any point in time. To give an example, once your elevator is installed, I need to ensure that it meets all the safety guidelines and you are made aware of it. So as a customer, I have to give you all those things, but also as an organization, I need to document and know that all these things were taken care when the elevator was given to you or when an escalator was handed over to you. So for us, it is part again, every part. The last bit is maintenance, very critical. Like you see in many industries, sorry, I don't mean to hurt, but air conditioning industries where we see most of the time, the person who comes to repair or to service will tell, Mera number le lo, and you kind of connect to me directly. We can't afford that because it's a safety product, an elevator, and the families move. So we have to always ensure that these kind of cowboy entrepreneurs are not too much. It can be maintained by anyone, but they have to be certified to maintain an escalator or an elevator. So I think for us, vigilance is part of the whole process. At every step, we have to have vigilance. And with the kind of people that we have in the field, because there is not a mechanized system for working on it. Like I want to have a contract which is digitally signed, but the secretary of the building, probably you and me, will also be not ready to give our Aadhaar card and do a digital approval or give a digital signature for it. So these are still a concern which we face during our regular transaction. So it is still very manual, and we have to imbibe all this vigilance process in the system so that both ways, the company does not suffer as well as the customer does not suffer. So two aspects, like Prameesh said, very important: preventive and corrective. Preventive is kind of talking at it all the time. It's walking the talk, ensuring that all the meetings start with core values. So we call it that the core values have to be the thing that by which we start the meeting, because the message has to be passed on to all the employees to the last string. Very rightly said, rotation policy. A person cannot manage one route all the time, even in maintenance. So these, at the basic level, we have to ensure that there is quite a lot of rotation. No cash policies, because we don't deal at all in cash. Even for monthly reimbursements, we don't do it. Lead by example at all point, and have a very strong whistleblower, because we deal with subcontractors as well. So that is very much an essential part, that whistleblower policy has to be strong. I would say the corrective part is to ensure that there is a thorough investigation for each case, however small or big it may be. Because like you mentioned, 5% of revenue, I don't know which 5%. So I have to investigate every small thing. And last but not the least, one thing we found helped us is publishing the cases without names. We release a monthly newsletter which kind of shares the case, what was found, and what is the action taken. So a characteristic approach to ensure that all employees understand it.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thanks,
Thank
Sandhya.
you, thank you.
Wonderful, wonderfully explained. In fact, I think this is where I think I was to take the next point of what we called culture of the organization, and I think you have explained this brilliantly. I think culture is nothing but I call a set of official rules and unofficial rules. And I think this is where official rules will come by way of a right documentation and communication. But unofficial rules are those where you take these publishing cases, penalizing right kind of people, and communicating it to all the people on that account. And I always believe, and this is what we will discuss at later stage, culture is also what we tolerate. And I think if we decide to tolerate ye chalta hai, then people will say, okay, this is a limit set by the organization, tab tak hum fraud karte rahenge. So I think this is what we are talking about. So let me move to Akhilesh now, because Akhilesh is the one who is he's living on that particular kind of practices of, investigations and vigilance and all of the things. So Akhilesh, what exactly are today's organizations take help from you, and how do you really, what kind of value addition you do for them to seek that kind of comfort? If you can spend some 5 minutes on that, that will be helpful for all of us on that. Of course, in my personal capacity, I have made good use of you and your practices in various other companies. But I think I would like to hear from you so that rest of the people can, get benefited out of it. So over to you, Akhilesh.
Yeah, thanks, Nagesh. I think this is very appropriate question. And I think, all four of you have spoken about what is going on in corporate and how companies are dealing with it. So when we look at forensic per se, there are two aspects of it. One is on the preventive side, and helping companies building the fraud risk framework, and the second is on the detective side. I would say on the preventive side, we do some work, maybe about 15-20%. The majority is on the detective side. And when we look at it today, where are the companies are looking at our support? So most of the organizations are looking at support considering that, okay, what kind of tools and technology we use. Do we, let's say, have people who know what is going on, what are the new things which are actually in the market, how do we use these technology to detect frauds and identify the evidence? So once we have actually used it, the other is to build the case. So if they, let's say, they have to go in the court of law, are we in a position to use that as evidence? So that is the next level where we actually work with companies. So two very critical aspects when they come and brief us. First thing they would like to understand is what kind of tools do we have? Do we have our labs, where in-house labs? Because in today's time, majority of the cases, and I would say probably more than 80 to 90% of the cases, we are using some of the other digital tool to identify, to perform the investigation and provide the evidence to the corporates. And that is where these having your analytics team, having your tools in-house, having people who understand how to use tools, and at the same time also understanding of business, because one is you are using the tool and how do you actually lead it with the business. The second is, if few years back we used to rely a lot on what we call lifestyle review, but that is not relevant in most of the cases today because of disposable income and the salary. So you can't really, unless someone is going completely out of the way, it is difficult to prove based on the lifestyle review. So what we do, we also go and look at the asset tracing, we do the market intelligence to be able to figure out if something is actually going wrong. And this is where I think while many organizations have people, as far as large organizations are concerned, to do the investigation in-house, at some point in time they actually then come and take our support to build their case. So we also work with law firms together, because we are good in that particular aspect, wherein we are able to help them on identifying the financial element, how the tracing of all the transactions, and then work with law firm to build the case for the companies. The other important aspect is the regulators. Now, we as a firm are also working on multiple cases. Of course, we cannot take those names because we are working on behalf of regulators. But these are primarily the expectation on that front is money trail. So we are working with them to identify on the money trail aspect. And even on the corporate side, now at many places we are being asked to provide the evidence on the money trail. Now that's a very peculiar thing, because there, how do you actually work on that? What kind of support you get becomes very relevant, and your data protection law and all comes into play when we look at it. We are also, in fact, working with organizations. They are expecting, okay, how do we move forward in these? So it is more like a consultative role wherein we are working with them. We are hand-holding them, telling them how you actually need to work on the investigation, what kind of checks and balances you need to put in place. A very recent, I mean, in fact, in today's time, Nagesh spoke about 5% as per that ASCFE report. But we recently came across a case wherein almost 35% of revenue was actually siphoned off, and it was a large organization, and it is probably a multinational from some other company having operations in India, and the top management in India created different firms actually to do that, similar names, and they were able to manage it. So 5%, yes, that seems very high, but once you start getting into it and you look at these instances, you know that, okay, things are really not so great, and these 5% will have some, definitely it's a rational number, not completely off the mark. Although when we hear it for the first time, we feel that it is something very, out of the way. It will not be the case. But yeah, I think I believe in that number, because we keep on doing these day in and day out for companies. And I think that's it's something. And on these aspects, whether you talk about market intelligence, whether you talk about asset tracing or digital forensic, or creating that analytics to be able to help companies on that, this is something which we are helping clients on. Thank you.
Thank you, Akhilesh. Thank you, Akhilesh. I don't know. Now I'll move to Satish. I know Satish has been a great cricketer. He was a wicketkeeper also as a batsman. Now I don't know his first inning was as a wicketkeeper or as a batsman, but his second inning comes now. I want you to take the avatar of ICAI member who was a part of that particular forensic audit related part, the guidelines. We would like to hear from you what exactly are these guidelines and how they will assist our firm and what exactly is the methodology, what exactly is expected. Maybe in 5 minutes if you can tell. All these things are already available for people, but it will be great if you can tell.
Great, Nagesh. Thanks. First of all, I would say that in 5 minutes, it will be a very, very difficult task. But since Nagesh and ASA has given this to me, I have to do it. I'm just thanking my stars. I'm not the chief auditor of that company Akhilesh was talking about. And I also confess now at the beginning that these standards were not written for such companies. It's written for a very generic type of a company. First of all, I loved the experience of being part of the very well-oiled team that wrote up these standards. We used to meet every Monday at between 4 and 5. And I attended almost 100% of the meetings. It was online because it was COVID times. And but it was the best thing that happened was that I learned so many different aspects of forensic investigation from people from very small towns, and I'm not trying to make a distinction between large towns and large cities and small towns, etc. But there were some people from Jaipur, Ahmedabad, Pune, who really, I was amazed at the quality of work that they were actually doing and the experiences they were bringing to bear in the writing up of these standards. So the first thing is that like a typical CA institute, there's a full process in which it is written. The team is formed. There is a written process. There is a review process. Then the whole standards it's driven by one person. Then finally it is put up to the council. The council then approves it. Then it goes. We have to also take the concurrence of so many different other authorities. There's a whole list of them from whom some kind of okay was really required. That happened. Then it comes in public domain, and then finally those suggestions need to be incorporated. Whatever suggestions came, if any suggestion came which we did not accept, then we had to give a reason why we are not accepting it. So there is a whole rigor of process which is followed when these kind of standards are written, and it was a very nice experience. So a couple of things that really that happened was that this forensic audit we keep saying, but it is forensic investigation because there is a clear-cut distinction between an audit and an investigation. An investigation goes a little deeper, and as Akhilesh was talking about and Prameesh was talking about, that when we have to collect evidences which would stand in the court of law. So those differentiation between what is actual forensic accounting, what is investigation. Does the forensic investigator also take part in the litigation that might follow after an investigation is concluded? Definitions of fraud. Certain basic principles were also defined, which I think is more or less in line with what internal auditing, internal control, risk management is all about. That how we should be independent, what should be our integrity levels, how objective we must be, what due professional care we bring onto the table, and that's the most important aspect in this particular standards. Confidentiality, because we will be getting access to so much of information. So what does that forensic investigator need to do 2 steps ahead to ensure that there is confidentiality not only from the partners but the entire team that has access to these data? What kind of skill and competencies that we required? And I think I was very happy that the example that I gave, I called it out right at the beginning that this audit team will not be able to do this investigation because the skills and competencies were not available. And then respecting the rights and obligations. Sometimes investigators have tendencies to go overboard of having intimidating tactics while dealing with the so-called fraudster. And so how we need to respect it, we need to do our job, but also respect it. The standards talks about it. Separating facts from opinions. That means we have to bring out all the facts. The evidence becomes a very important aspect. So the standards, as I call it, there is a preface, there is a framework, there are basic principles which I just spoke about, and then there are sections under which these standards are actually written. The first set of standards is on the key concepts. That is, we'll talk about the nature of engagement. We'll talk about what is a fraud risk, what laws and regulations that we need to comply with, and how do we apply the hypothesis while we are doing this forensic investigations. The next section, which is 200 series, is about the standards on engagement management. That means when we get an investigation, what are the engagement objectives that need to be clearly spelled out, the engagement acceptance and the appointment, how will we use the work of an expert, how will we deal with agencies, because sometimes these the CIA or some authority tells us to do, SFIO tells us to do this investigation, then how do we engage with them, and how do we keep our communication with the stakeholders. Then this 300 series of the standard talks about how do you do the execution, and this is a very important part of the standard, which talks about how do you plan the assignment, what evidence and documentation do we keep, how do we conduct our work procedures, how do we conduct interviews, when actually trying to get into finding out what really happened, who did it, when did it happen, how did it happen, and so on. And also the review and supervision that is required at all levels in doing this job, and testifying before a competent authority, because most investigations do not end by this, like an audit ends with the issuance of an audit report, but the investigation sometimes begins by just submitting the audit report, because then you need to testify before the income tax authorities or whoever has actually appointed you. Then there was, as Akhilesh also was talking about, there are standards on specified areas like applying data analysis, evidence discovery in the digital domain. That's where we are today. And there is one specific thing that is talking about loans and borrowings, because so much of NPA is happening, etc. The committee thought it fit to have one standard 430 on loans and borrowings. Then the last two sections, one is on the standards on reporting. How do we report the results? There's no particular format is prescribed, but what is going to be the elements of what we really report? And then there are standards on quality control. So the standards are written not from a perspective of actually you read the standards and start doing an investigation. It's a little helicopter kind of a view, but it's an all-encompassing view. I think 5 minutes is this is what I could probably.
Great executive summary for all of us. I think we got the right perspective. Thanks a lot, Satish. I think I must say that I'm inundated with a lot of questions and answers. So I think it is best that we have about 10-12 minutes. So we'll start talking about that particular part now. So first thing first, basically, I think, what I'm saying is there is a feeling, and that's what the question says, that when some fraud is committed by a senior person in the organization versus a fraud that is committed by a person at lower strata of the things on that account. I think organization, according to him, they feel that we are very harsh on the lower of the pyramid people, and people who are on the higher level, higher pedestal, you start thinking whether I should do it, whether he did it with intent and all the things. So I just want to know, do you think this is something which is a consistent struggle in all our minds? So I think I will request Prameesh and also Sandhya to talk about it, and then Satish also on that particular part, and that would be very useful from our perspective. You don't have to talk about names, you don't have to say about your organization. I want to hear from you, what is your feel on this particular part across the corporate? Prameesh?
Yeah, so the question is very relevant. I mean, so somebody who has done in a lower level, it's for organization, the management has to take an action. So the actions are very simple. He has to depart immediately, or whatever the appropriate actions are. Those are very quickly done. But if it's a senior guy is involved, so issues are different. The authority to take an action lies with the senior guys. and those senior guys are involved there. So let's say he may not be a CEO or CFO, but let's say he's a manufacturing head, a very senior guy, and is there an issue? How do we address this? So I mean, there is no choice but to take an immediate action there. But what does corporate want? What does management do is they want to make sure that before they are taking an action, all aspects are viewed in detail. I mean, they don't want to leave anything and then later on realize, oh, we made a mistake there, or it's in gray area. Now imagine having somebody made a complaint here. Let's say that the manufacturing guy is taking a bribe, for example, just theoretical example, and you start investigating, you start investing that reading that manufacturing head who spent 25-30 years of his lifetime in an organization, and it turned out to be a false. So that can have a grave ramification on successability. So that is why organization takes time. It is not that sometimes intent is wrong or intent is not to take an action, but the ramification is such a large for an organization that they want to make sure that they understand in a full context. So for a good organization, one would be very immediate, but second would definitely take a little more time.
Fair, Prameesh. Sandhya, what's your take on this particular thing?
I think so well explained by Prameesh, but now in my new role, I see a different comparison. That's why I was a bit smiling. Operations people tell it's very easy to have a sanction metrics on operations. But if an accounting guy makes a goof up, where's the sanction metrics? Okay. And I really don't have an answer to it. Suppose if the supply chain guy sends wrong material, where is the sanction metrics for it? So I would say these are the questions which will always keep on coming. There are two sides to each coin. I would say, like Prameesh mentioned, at the senior level, it is a lot more thing. I would say the first thing starts with introspecting the policies that we have in place, because it allowed such a thing to happen at a senior level, which is very important. So senior level, at least in our organization, it is taken seriously, because most of the time it is related to customer and the ramifications are very intense, because then you lose a customer for long lifetime. It's more than monetary, it's first customer, and second is also what is the message that you give to all the other employees. So at a senior level, if you miss taking an action, very difficult for all others to then make you, for you to make it believe that we will stand by the code of conduct. So
correct,
time taking, but has to be closed looped always.
Yeah, thank you. I think now she just shifted from CFO's office to operations. I think she has given the right example, and she knows she was on the other side. Here now she's on that other side. So brilliantly articulated. I think I will go to Akhilesh. Akhilesh, I think this is again a question which has come in. I just want to know, people are saying that there is a general tendency amongst most of the corporates to play safe. Kuch fraud ho gaya, let's get an external agency to do it. You know, they will say evidence wise it is better. Then, you know, you will create right kind of logs in that particular thing. Then you can organize structured interviews around that particular part. Then, you know, you can weed out that bias of known unknown. I know the boss, I know this guy's friend. So that kind of thing is there. What is your view, and how generally organizations are looking at it? Are they outsourcing these assignments to all of you people service providers, or they do it internally? What's your take on this? You are on mute, Akhilesh.
Yeah, so typically what we have seen is, in majority of the cases, the first level of investigation is done in-house. So you have some fact finding which they try and figure out and do it in-house. And then they actually go out and look support from the external vendor. So typically what happens is, when you have some other leading indicator which says that, okay, there are some gray areas, typically that is where we come in. So we have looked at many of cases in that. So For example, we are talking about a lot of NPAs and all happening nowadays, and even on fraud standards by ICI, they have come out for that specific standard on that. So we were doing a review at a bank, a private bank of, there was a whistleblower of a board level person getting involved in sanction in a particular case. And then that particular loan went bad after 1 year. So as per RBI regulation, if it is within 1 year, the ramification is different. But this particular case, it did not went bad within a year as per bank standard. It was slightly just above 1 year when it went bad. So we actually started working on that, and then we looked at all the communications which have been there, the way loan has been sanctioned, and what was more important is the industry understanding of the industry of the company to whom loan has been sanctioned. So that became very critical part. So the person who is investigating is able to relate how activities which are being done, or whether in a normal course, the way policies has been defined at the bank, whether that will be able to capture these information or not. We also noted the aspect, we talk about all those performance standard, and then you have to meet targets and all. So somewhere that plays a very large part in that, where even if a substandard case is there, you want to push it through by providing justification, and the major thing reason is you have to probably meet all your targets and all. So some of these aspects are there in the mind of the people who are actually performing the work. And in terms of the organization, somewhere it is indecisive as to what needs to be done in these cases, because the policies and procedures are not very clear. And that is where we, so what Sandhya spoke about, having a very structured kind of policy in place, or even to the extent saying that, okay, I mean, a fraud risk assessment, if it gets done, and based on the fraud risk assessment, the organization identify what kind of risk exists within the organization and what kind of control they can build in, so that on an ongoing basis, they are able to capture these events. And if there are specific red flags which are getting identified, we can even look at how to automate that. So if those red flags are there in the system, then somewhere those trigger or those reports actually reaches to the person, whether it is probably a compliance officer or someone within the organization who can actually look at those triggers and then take appropriate action.
Thank you, Akhilesh. I think one thing in that context I remember, and this is a very relevant point before Sandhya can move out because she has some 5 o'clock kind of timeline. Sandhya, I am a fond reader, and I have liked one book. The book is called, Willful Blindness. It's a book written by a lady called Margaret Heffernan. She's the one who writes a lot of scripts for BBC on that account. Way back in 2009, she wrote that book. In that, she was given those typical tasks around that Lehman Brothers crash and, the Enron related parts. So she was told, you write 2 different scripts. And she realized that she was trying to write 2 scripts. She says, I can't write because the observations, findings, the cause, the root cause analysis were all the same. So she eventually ended up writing a book called Willful Blindness. In that, she says, and this is something all of us should be dreadful and worry about it, and especially for me, I'm chair of audit committee on many of these companies. She says business collapses are invariably preceded by a long period of clean audit reports, by way of nil fraud reports, and no whistleblowing complaints at all. So I think this is where, if you realize that for a long period of quarters, 4 quarters, 6 quarters, 7 quarters, you find everything is honky-dory is what you are getting it. Either you need to pinch yourself to say, "Main Ram Rajya mein hu kya?" or otherwise you should prepare a resignation letter in that regard. So I think from that perspective, I just want to understand, how can somebody make a whistleblowing complaint or mechanism, that framework, quite robust? I think you, Sandhya, rightly said about this publishing cases and all. That's a great initiative. But in town hall talks, in communications? Are there any e-learnings? What kind of things are there? If you can give some 2 or 3 examples, you and even after that Prameesh, that would be very useful. And then I will request Satish also to supplement in that regard. So Sandhya, first question to you, because you after that you are free to go. So that's what I thought. And thanks a lot in anticipation. I mean, in ahead of the thing, because I know after that you will have to go out on that account because you have another meeting. So over to you, Sandhya, first, if you can tell me about it.
Yeah, thanks, Nagesh. And I would say, yes, it has to be, we have various branches and multiple touch points. So every town hall, every possible time, you have to start with core values. So Schindler, we are talking about audit, but the first thing is safety, because it is always about user safety. So safety and quality are 2 things which are always talked about, and quality means quality across the organization. This always has to be spoken at every possible instance from all the management team members and at the local management as well. It has to be so ingrained. कभी कभी भगवान की पूजा हम डर से करते हैं, I always say that, and it has to be that way, so sacrosanct that you follow it all the time. Is it possible? No, because you can't have everyone coming up with the same mindset. Many people, multiple backgrounds. So we have to keep on reiterating that. Close loop the investigations quickly, not taking a lot of time, so that they know that it can't be tolerated. And these things spread very fast in an organization. I've seen one of the employees against which an investigation was being done. The day we received the whistleblower complaint, we thought that it was serious. We immediately put the person on garden leave so that the person does not operate in the organization. I think so. It spread so fast that you then have to just talk in the town hall, and they know that you are walking the talk. So these are the cases which have to be always done. There's no enough times that you can tell ki you reiterate in one forum and not in another. It has to be all the time. I would say probably for people with a lot of feet on the field makes it all the more important, because the last person is not always part of the organization culture day in, day out. The person is not sitting in the office. The person is meeting a very different clientele. So it's just walking the talk all the time helps, I would say, to bring down the cases.
Thank you, Sandhya, and thanks a lot for participating in these things. Prameesh, can you just supplement what exactly you can give some 2-3 pointers to this particular thing? How today's organizations believe in further strengthening the whistleblower mechanism?
So what Pinge rightly said about communicating, and also I would add, because she's already covered those aspects there, but to also make sure that even as don't wait for a large event to happen. I mean, the communication should be there, and it has to be displayed on small behavior also. For example, people submitting their tax supportings, there should be absolute truth in there. For example, people taking printouts of their children's school work, for example. People taking leave, showing work from home and then actually on the leave, for example. So all those small events should be definitely talked about, should be kind of, because this is all small is genesis of the bigger event. So this is very important for an organization to really do that. Another point which I want to add about is about this hotline aspect. So where we say that we educate people to report the event in the hotline. But I've seen what happens actually is that when people kind of give their complaints, complaints sometimes is so vague or so big or so macro that, let's say that when people is taking a break, for example, just to give an illustration, how would you investigate, for example? You will never be able to investigate properly. So the idea is to also educate when you are addressing your hotline, when giving the numbers, that please explain the event in more details, because people would not like to name themselves when complaining, and anyway you are just stuck somewhere, and the other person might think that, okay, I have complained but nobody is taking an action. So this part is also very important, that we educate our the employee or associates that they have to give complaints in much more detail for us to investigate.
Okay, thank you, thank you. I think Akhilesh, we will be running very, it's already past 5 o'clock, so we got only 3 or 4 minutes. So I think we have, in fact, most of the thing we have managed to answer. So I must say thank you very much, Prameesh. Thank you, Satish. Thank you, Akhilesh, and thank you, Sandhya. And before we close, I just want to summarize what are our learnings from that particular perspective. And I think I can clearly see, I think all of us putting together, they are saying it is necessary to put what we call anti-fraud related agenda across the organization. And a lot of, I would say, good inputs that have come to us on that account. They say they require a very good code of conduct for the organization, which needs to be emphasized and re-emphasized from time to time. They're talking about. Second one is how we can make whistleblower policy far more effective on that particular part. And this is where, core values need to be explained, is what Sandhya talked about. Our friend has talked about reputation and liability risk. And I think Sandhya would have loved to say elevator speech. She's the one who's the manufacturer of elevators. So that elevator speech of how good is our Schindler, how good is our, Samsonite. These are some of the things that really makes you pride. For instance, I am a ex-Tata employee. I still believe the Tata Code of Conduct is probably one of the best. And it's available on the website. Anybody can just copy paste it to meet with your requirement. It's brilliantly done on that particular part. So like that, then it has to be coupled with anti-fraud training, and also third party they talked about. And this is where she said subcontractors is a big business. I'm sure even Prameesh has the same kind of things on that account. Then rightly said, surprises of audits. And I think this is what Prameesh talked about, internal audit. It could be even statutory audit taking up something. So internal financial controls is something you have to look at it. So that's a great insight from Prameesh and that particular thing. And, I would say job rotation. That's what Prameesh talked about. And these are some of the great inputs and insights for all of us on that particular part. So I think, wonderful thing that we have a lot of things takeaways we have taken. And I think more or less I have managed to answer the question that have come out on that particular part. But now that leaves with one more important point for me. Just today morning, another good friend of mine, who is also an independent director, I was talking to him about overall things, saying that I'm going to take this session and all other things. He told me, you tell my, he's in a dilemma. He says, one of my CFO, he's on that board of a CFO. He told just 4 or 5 days back to say, my mummy is very ill. Because of that, I'm going on leave for about 5 or 6 days kind of things on that account. And he says, today morning, I see him on a Facebook giving a picture of his, Argentina versus the semi-final being shown on that account. That is what he was talking about. So this is how ethics, start and ethics end on that particular part. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for being on this particular.
Nagesh, he had the ability,
yes.
he had the foresight to know that he'll fall sick in Qatar.
No, his mother is ill, is what he said basically. So
after the match is
after the match.
So this is what it is. So these are some of the dilemmas that people go through on that particular part. So thank you very much, gentlemen. Thanks, Akhilesh. Thanks, Prameesh, and thanks, Satish, for being here. And we must say thank you very much, Sandhya. Also, she's not there. So over to, I would say, to whom I should pass it on to Vikram. Is that right? Because
yes,
is the one to whom I should pass on.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Nagesh, Satish, Prameesh, Sandhya, who's left, and Akhilesh, for sharing your very rich practical experience on the subject and the valuable insights on this very pertinent topic, making this a very engaging session. I am sure the audience would have taken huge benefit out of these deliberations. I would like to thank our audience for joining us today and being so patient with us. Now, as there are some questions that we could not take up due to paucity of time, we will reply to every question individually over email. If anyone has any further questions, please don't hesitate to contact at manisha.sachdeva@asa.in. Thanks a lot, everyone, and have a great evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, Bye, Bikram.